I'm Joel Kurtzman, Managing Senior Fellow at the Milken Institute, and I'd like to welcome everyone to Leadership on the Front Lines. This is a discussion about how we lead today, what we've learned from leadership and what there is to teach. You know, leadership is one of those topics that is talked about. It's a perennial. There are probably more books written about leadership than any other topic, certainly in business. And yet the appetite never ceases because it's such a deep and interesting and, let's be honest, difficult subject to master. Well, we have here some masters of leadership, and I'd like to introduce our panel. On my right, we have Nikesh Arora. Nikesh is Vice Chairman, SoftBank Corporation. He's the CEO of SoftBank Internet and Media Incorporated. And then we have Eric Cantor, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Moelis & Company, and former Majority Leader of the U.S. House of Representatives. Sherry Lansing, CEO of the Sherry Lansing Foundation, founder of NCORP's Teachers Program, and a longtime leader in the entertainment industry. We have Judy Smith, who is president of and CEO of Smith & Company, and a longtime, is operative the right word?
Go for
in Washington and in business. And Don Peebles. Don is founder, chairman, and CEO of Peebles Corporation, which is a real estate development company that has a large portfolio all up and down the East Coast corridor. So welcome, everybody. And let's begin this discussion with the question I think that everyone really has at heart. You know, with all the books, with all the articles, Harvard Business Review and so forth about leadership, it makes it seem like anybody can be a leader. All you have to do is read a few books, take a few training courses, and that's it. Is that true? I mean, it's really, it seems to me it's something quite more difficult. Nikesh, you've been a leader in a number of companies. Tell me what you think. Can anyone become a leader, or how do you see it?
I guess it's fair to say, if you look at our history, a lot of people have assumed positions of leadership over time. So it's not that people cannot lead, but usually where it comes from within the people. There are certain kinds of people who make better leaders than other people. And then usually, you start off with somebody who has a passion, who has a desire to make something happen, do something different, change the world. And effectively, that passion leads them to sort of take a step outside of the box and try and inspire other people to follow them. Leaders are useless without followers. Leaders are different from managers, or managers are people who want to manage. Leaders are people who inspire other people, who eventually get people to follow them. And you will find that usually passion is the first thing that comes to mind when people are thinking about leadership and wanting to change the world. And then a lot of people get inspired by that. And over time, those leaders learn how to keep those people inspired, how to get things done, because passion is a good start. But if you don't follow that up with execution, you'll find your followers begin to leave, saying, great, he's a lot of talk, but not much substance. So usually passion followed by great execution will help us find great leaders, or will help great leaders evolve.
But can those two things be taught, passion and great execution?
I think the former is harder to teach than the latter. And usually what happens is great leaders sometimes execute well themselves, or they find great people they surround themselves with who help them execute. But it's very hard to teach passion.
Eric, you've been in government, obviously, and in business both. How do you find the difference in terms of leading in those two different worlds? Are they similar, or do you have the same tools at hand? What have you found in terms of the difference?
Well, first of all, I want to agree with Nikesh and say I do believe that there are two elements to leadership. One is sort of that vision or that passion, and the other is in execution. It's how do you go about the day job of making sure that those who are behind you that you are leading are following. And, you know, I go back to that old adage, whether it's government or business, that, you know, a leader without followers is just a man or woman out taking a walk. You know, it really is about people. You know, leadership, you know, starts with that spark of passion. And I think it is, whether, again, government or business, it is the fundamental piece of that passion and vision is about change. It is about how you are going to convince people on the second part, how you're going to convince them that the fear they have about that change is actually less than their fear of the status quo. Again, government or business, same in my experience. And you know, it is the second piece, and I agree with Nikesh again, the implementation, the practical aspect of it is more difficult. Can you teach someone that? I believe that you've got to, there's some prerequisites you can teach, like you've got to know your stuff. So in government, whether it was the policy piece we were trying to push across the floor of the Congress, and in business, whether it's the competency in an investment bank like Moelis, whether you have that prerequisite. Everybody has that in business. You should, or you won't stay in business. But it's that sort of intangible of people, of sensitivities. And it goes back to this notion that you've got to somehow convince people that following a leader who is adopting change is something they're comfortable with because they can manage that fear better than the fear of status quo.
Sherry, you mentioned when we had our discussion about the difference in challenge between being a regent on the one hand of the university, and on the other hand, you have a foundation. Now, as a regent, you have more limited areas of movement, one would expect. It's a bigger organization. You have, it's more of a board situation. How do you get both of those organizations? How do you, as someone on a board, how do you get movement of your organization?
Sure. So I'm going to answer that question and just go back and be the contrarian in the group.
Wow. There we go.
And I think it's interesting that the two women wore red. I think you should notice that as a sign of leadership.
We didn't coordinate.
We didn't even talk ahead of time. I actually think that everyone can be a leader, but the question is, are they going to be a great leader? Because you see people that are constantly promoted and they become the leader, but the question is, are they going to be a great leader? And just to be the contrarian, I think that each and every person has a passion inside of them, but they are often afraid to address it. You know, it's like when you see a bunch of kids that are very young and you really probe them, they have a dream, but over time, they are often told that that dream is silly or that they shouldn't do that. And so they lose their passion or they lose their ability to express that passion. But all of us has a passion. You know, maybe, you know, you want to be a great drum player, but you tried and it didn't work, you know, or it was sort of, you know, something that you gave up on. So I actually think we're instinctively born with the ability to do those things. And so if you allow that passion of yours to take over, then I think you become a great leader. And I also think that if you're just an okay leader, you can learn better leadership skills. Like you can learn to listen to people, you can learn to maybe create a culture of collaboration rather than a culture of fear, which I personally think makes a better leader. So again, great leadership is probably instinctive and it comes with charisma and it comes with, you know, people that aren't afraid, but you can become a better leader. Otherwise, I feel like, you know, if there isn't room for growth, then I feel we're diminishing the potential of every person. Now, to answer your question. Ironically, when you're part of a big group, which would be the regents, or you're part of a foundation, which is my own foundation, so I need a vote of 1. The same skill set applies. It's an interesting thing. As part of the regents, there's often a lot of people who wish to be the chair of the regents, or they wish to be the chair of the committee. And I always don't care, because I feel that if I'm passionate about an issue, that then I can talk among the group of people that I need to build consensus. And if I'm patient, and if I don't give up, and if I'm persistent, I believe that eventually my voice will be heard. And if I give up, then I know that I wasn't passionate enough, or I was wrong, which is also something that I think a leader has to admit. I mean, many times, even going back to my movie days or going back to working within a big organization like the Region, I will go down a path and listen to what other people have to say and change my mind. And so I'm very comfortable with the same skill set that I applied running a studio, that I applied to my foundation, which literally does need a vote of 1, and to the Regions, which needs a vote of like 26 people to try and build the consensus. So I think it's the same skills.
So, Judy, you said something provocative on the phone call last week, and that was, so we assume now, I think, from this discussion that passion is important, execution is also extremely important, and you mentioned technology.
Oh, yes, I did. I think in light of social media and the technology that we find ourselves using and involved in today, that leadership has taken on a different meaning, only in the sense that, in my viewpoint, obviously, it's always crisis and problems and issues, that in order to be a good leader, it can't be just doing sort of peacetime. It has to be doing wartime. It has to be doing a time when there's a problem or an issue, and you have to be able to demonstrate leadership. When I'm dealing with CEOs, the number, or I should say the 2 problems that they always complain about is that they're in a room full of employees that are giving them their point of view, but they don't feel like they're taking leadership because they don't feel like it's an honest point of view. And so usually when I get a call, it is an honest voice to lend some advice. I also think as well that as you think about moving up, or just period where you are at a high level, that you need to be able to handle crisis and problems and issues when they come up. And social media just makes it very difficult, in the sense that when something happens, prior to it, you had some time to maybe think about it, write a little plan, deal with it. But, you could be running a Fortune 500 company today, and in 2 minutes from now, you get a call while you're sitting here in this conference that your company computers have been hacked, or an angry employee has come back and has held up 2 people in a building, or you found out that your CFO has misused funds, and that's going to get out in the press. But it will not get out tomorrow. It will get out in a minute, in a second. So how do you handle that? Are you prepared? What do you do? And I think people are now, whether it's your board, your president, if you're not the president of the company, your stakeholders, all of those people are measuring you about how well you handle that.
So let me ask Dawn, you mentioned on our call as well the idea of innovation as one of the things that gets people excited, gets them to work together, and generates passion. How do you mean that?
Well, Sherry pointed out that we all start off with passion. We all start off as children with great ideas and dreams and big dreams. And throughout our childhood, society puts these barriers in front of you. They tell you that you can't do this. They tell you that this is too risky, you should do this, or don't go with your passion, go here because this is a safer route. Don't push the envelope. Don't follow your dreams. Don't follow your passion. And so what I think a good leader should do is inspire and to help people, especially those you lead, knock down those barriers within their heads and let them know that there's no limitation. So the leader is the one who says, yes, we can climb Mount Everest. And it's the manager who will set up the camp. And so we should inspire those who work with us, who want to do something greater. And so part of what we found effective is, we're building bricks and mortar so that we assemble bricks and mortar around the country. How really exciting can that be? Or we're going to build a, luxury condo development for very wealthy people. Great. What's transformational about that? Well, if we do our business in a transformational way and say, well, we're going to, in our hotel in Philadelphia, we're going to select a large general contractor who happens to be woman-owned and the oldest minority construction company in the country, and we're going to give them the opportunity to build their first hotel. So how we do business can be transformational, and that unlocks the passion within the team that we're leading because they now are working for something greater. And what that does is it opens up their minds to their dreams, and then they can take their dreams and be a part of leadership. But leadership is developed over time, and it's extinguished over time. And so anyone, again, Sherry, I think is right, that anyone can actually become a leader. And now the question is whether they become a good leader. But the first thing is unlocking the passion of what they believe in and also working for something that is transformational. And we've got some significant issues facing the country right now in terms of opportunity. We have a large section of the country that now believes the American dream is not accessible to them. So we now need leadership more than ever in a more transformational way, in a different way, and not being afraid to go with change. And I think that's a big part of it.
Let me ask the panel, is there a difference between passion and inspiration? And if so, what is it? You mentioned, Don, inspiring people. You started off, Nikesh, talking about passion. Are those two different things? You can have a lot of passion, but to inspire, that means, to me at least, that then people are taking on the mission themselves and walking over the mountains or doing whatever they have to do. How do you get from one to the other? Are they the same? Are they different? Does it matter?
Well, I think it goes back to what Sherry sort of started alluding to in the beginning. It's like everybody has an inherent passion. I think that's great. We all start with the same basics. So I agree that you can be a leader, but the key is, do you have the courage to pursue your passion? And is the environment around you supportive in allowing you to pursue your passion? And if you can, then inspiration goes down to some part of your leader was charisma. If you have charisma, you have the passion, you have the courage to follow your passion, you're more than likely to inspire people. But that goes back into, if you have a very strong belief in what you are suggesting that you want to do, you want to change the world, you're most likely going to inspire one person or two people. Now, I'll give you a funny anecdote. My last job when I was at Google, we tried this experiment. Said, if you want to build a great product, you have to go to a room full of people like this and pitch them your idea internally. So you're not going to get anybody to work on your project. You have to inspire people to work on your project. So somebody said, I want to start a new email system called Gmail. And people say, you crazy? There are 300 email systems out there. There's no sense in starting a new system. And the guy said, I'm going to dedicate 20% of my time to do this because that's my passion. And two people said, great, we'll help you. And the reason they gave out the first 6, you were only allowed to give 6 emails to people because they weren't given enough resources so that they only had one server. So you can only have 1 million email accounts. So they gave out only 6. And lo and behold, they realized 6 months later there was no spam because everybody knew someone who'd gotten an email address. So there was no way that somebody was going to send you a bad email. So it's sort of like, even in companies, you can follow a model where rather than saying, we're going to do the following 5 things and 5 of you are going to work on it, you can say, who's excited about this? Who's willing to stand up in front of your people and inspire some people to come follow you because then they're more likely to go sort of move mountains and climb over things to make it happen, as opposed to you say, oh, good morning, I just graduated from a great university. I've been allocated to the product management team. Hence, I'm going to have to get up in the morning and do this.
Go-
I think the inspiration is having the ability to move people to action so that they are inspired to do and to act, sort of to follow you over the mountain, so to speak. And I don't think a lot of people have that ability to do that, because you have to be able to translate that passion into inspiration. But why should somebody be inspired? So you have to make that. You have to make that clear.
Yeah, no, please.
No, I agree totally. I mean, you asked if they were different. Quite. I mean, you can have great passion for something, and it doesn't necessarily translate into leadership skills. But in order to be a leader, you have to have passion. And I think that there are some people who are very passionate about their business or are passionate about a cause, but they're not people that are necessarily that likable, or they don't, as I said before, they often maybe create a culture of fear, and so people stay away from them, or they're not organized, or, I mean, I could just go on with a laundry list of things. And then you're not inspired to follow them. It takes that mystical thing that inspires us. Maybe they don't have good communication skills. Maybe they're passionate about what they do, like an artist, and they're just into their own world. And that's not going to translate to leadership skills. We're inspired by their work, but we're not necessarily inspired by them. So I think, you can't be a great leader unless you have passion for what you're doing, because you'll quit along the way. But you can have great passion for something, and we won't necessarily follow you. Can I just go back to what you said? Because I think one of the things that has changed so much, as Judy said, is what you do in a crisis. And I remember the day my world changed, and this is going to show you how old I am, was when they invented the fax machine. Forget the email. My world changed when they invented the fax machine. And I still remember when I used to be able to say, well, that sounds interesting, put it in a letter and send it to me. And I knew I had 3 days to make a decision. And suddenly it comes over the fax, and within 10 minutes, someone's saying to me, well, what's your answer? Now, that is a terrible thing. I mean, I love email. I'm addicted to my iPad. All that's true. But it's a terrible thing, because what it's robbed us of is the ability to think. And, so I think also in the modern world, not dealing with a crisis, but even dealing with a crisis, you're just going to react instantly, because it's all over Twitter, it's all over, social media, and everybody's asking you for your answer. But sometimes you give an answer without even thinking.
But see, I agree. That's the wrong.
That's the wrong thing.
thing
I want
to
to hear.
do. Well, let's not do that.
There's a great lesson in that in the political and government arena. I can
take
tell
a
you
step back.
the one thing that you saw with technological advancement, and Twitter, for instance, a great example. Ideas, when you're in development stage of a policy proposal or a piece of legislation, if word got out, which you assume always, it is within 4 seconds that the entire world now has the ability to form a perception about what you are doing, which then causes the reaction that, oh my gosh, I've got to go out there and think. But if you take that step back in terms of leadership, the fundamentals of leadership haven't changed, but I think technology has forced leaders to up their game. And whether it's to reserve judgment, or to take a step back and say, we're not going to respond right now, and just let all the clamor out there take place. But I want to go back to this notion of passion and inspiration. Because, I think we've said passion, certainly a necessary ingredient. Inspiration, though, it is the part of leadership that I think is contextual. That leaders operate in a macro environment. So if you have a CFO that all of a sudden it was reported did something wrong with corporate and treasury dollars, how do your employees, how do your associates, in the government arena, how do the other officials view you as reacting to that particular situation? And again, contextual, because you've got to take into account these larger forces at work that were caused by a Twitter eruption or something else? How do you respond to that? But then how do you inspire somebody, again, going back to this notion of change and help them go with you somewhere? If you can respond to situations like that, you instill that confidence that they're put at ease, that, hey, that man or woman is a leader I can count on in these type of situations. And then go back to that vision that says, I need you to go here. Not there, that was a distraction. We've got to go here. And it's conquering that fear in people. And Sherry, you said that a lot of people are fearful of unleashing that passion, but you've got to be able to get that passion in track with yours to show them that actually it's going to be beneficial to them, that where you're leading them. So I think that's what inspiration is about.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that if you look at passion is actually an individual expression. It's an individual motivator.
Right.
Inspiration is a team sport. So, for example, I learned a lot from coaching my son in basketball from the time he was 6 till 13. And then he got better and I couldn't teach him anything else. But my role was those young players. And initially we coached girls and boys, and they played in co-ed sports. And so it was for me to tell, I had the passion for the sport, but it was for me to tell the young, tall girl for her age that you can block that boy's shot and then give her the confidence to be able to do that. So the same thing is in business, is that my passion should then go to inspire by allowing people the freedom to do what they believe is best, to take talented people, bring talented people with a certain level of character and commitment, and a goal of being transformative, and then to inspire them to perpetuate that culture. So when, we're doing business in 7 different cities and 3 different time zones, so stuff is coming every day and every minute. If I had to respond to every one of those things, and they can be big or small, I would never get anything done. So the part of leadership is inspiring people to buy into a culture and to a way of thinking and to a cause and a goal, so that you can count on them to act on their own. Because when I'm coaching basketball, I'm not out there playing the game, they are. And they've got to make good decisions, and they've got to be able to be effective and react to the circumstances as they present themselves. And so inspiration is a step backwards. In terms of a leader, you step back and you allow your team to be inspired and to use that inspiration to go and build.
Sorry.
No, you go.
Why am I love what you said, that inspiration is a team sport. I think that was like kind of a brilliant summary, and passion is individual. The thing that we haven't discussed, which I think is so important and such a challenge if it's a big company, is the humanity that you display to your employees. And that is hard, because if you have, 5 people, fine. You can remember their birthdays, you can remember to ask about their children or their significant other, whatever. But if you have, thousands of people in lots of offices and you're a leader representing government, whatever, that's extremely hard. So there has to be, if you're lucky, a feeling when you're talking that people trust you and that they like you. And that's sort of a gift. And sometimes we're fooled by people and sometimes they turn out to be real. But to me, the thing that we haven't talked about is the culture starts at the top. You set the rules. You set the rules for honesty, for transparency, for caring, for whatever it is. And then you have to hire the right people underneath you. And those people have to carry out the culture even more than you. Because some of your employees you're never even going to meet. And they have a whole perception of you. So I think we have to talk about that structure as well, because that's really important.
Yeah, I wanted to get to that, actually. That was perfect in terms of leading into this, because I did a study of a Wall Street firm that unfortunately is no longer with us, that was high flyer and had a lot of great people. I went through the company and interviewed dozens of people to find out what they thought, and I was sent to do this by the CEO. Most people were complaining about the CEO, and how he had built a moat around himself and then protected that with walls, and then used that to enrich himself and become extremely greedy. And they were resentful. And now, one of the reasons that this firm collapsed was because no one came to its aid when it was in trouble. People essentially allowed it to fail. They only looked out for their own interests. They got their money out if they could, and then they watched this 100-year-old institution fail. So
That's a one key thing, that when you are in a crisis or when you're in a bad spot, it's hard to make friends. If you don't have them ahead of time, you shouldn't count on them. But go ahead.
Well, no, and that's my question. That's my question. So to put it out there, another way to put it, and my example is, or my question really. So when you think about Microsoft during the Bill Gates period, everybody remembers how he would rock back in his chair, and people were wondering, is he autistic? Is this some kind of mannerism? And over time, when you went through the halls at Microsoft, you saw that lots of people were doing it. And pretty soon it seemed that the whole company was sort of adopting this very idiosyncratic behavior. So people are watching the leader.
Yes.
They're
We all thought if we
copying them.
rocked that we would become geniuses.
So how do you, as a leader, how do you make sure that you're sending the right message every day when you walk in, when you park your car or get out of your car or off the subway or however you do it, so that the people who are looking at you under a microscope, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, are getting the right message?
Well, that's who you are. The reality is that we're all who we are, and we see it in politics, Eric, as you know, all the time. Ultimately, who you are will surface. And so leaders need to be armed with a sense of character and also avoid detachment. So part of it is as you run a larger company, and I started my company 33 years ago, and so it's grown significantly since then. But I try to stay still connected to my company. I still try to stay grounded. I don't want to insulate. My job is not to insulate myself from those who I work with or everyday life. And so a part of that is how you live your life and who you are. If you are a kind person and you are respectful and you are considerate, then your team is going to see that and they're going to perpetuate that within the culture. Also, I think it's important, again, when it comes to transformation and goals, it's critical that that transfers throughout the company. So give you an example. One of our hotels in Washington, D.C., I'm a big believer in diversity. So our first GM was an African-American woman, and that hotel was one of the top 3 in the world in its system. We took a young man who was a busboy in the restaurant and put him on a night shift as an assistant front desk manager. He grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C., one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, and one of 8 children, lived in public housing. Within 5 years, he was the general manager of the hotel. It is scored in the top 3 worldwide within the Marriott system in terms of performance. He is now the second African-American to head up the Greater Washington, D.C. Hotel Association. And every time I see him, he says, "How can I thank you for this opportunity?" I said, "You know what? By giving someone else and investing in someone else the same opportunity you got." And so the idea is that we give opportunity as leaders, but we have to convince our team to buy into that culture of caring about the human being and caring about their lives and providing an environment for them to fulfill their dreams and to help other people. And if you don't have that culture, no matter how you try to portray it, it will not work because people will see you for who you are, because you can fool people 90% of the time, but there's going to be that 10% they're going to see exactly who you are.
But one of the things that you said, I think, was in the concept of what you're saying was a good leader takes risk. And that, I think, is critical. You took a risk. The person that you just mentioned didn't, when you look at it, have the experience at the particular time. He grew into it. But I think part of a leader is taking risk. I know for me, part of the greatest success that I've had is when I take risk and not being afraid to do that. I think that's critical. That's critical.
Can I also add to what you were saying? I think that employees are really smart, and they get a sense of who's at the top because it permeates down, that culture. So if you have a culture that believes in diversity, they know that, and they see that. I mean, you walk around, you can see whether someone believes in diversity or doesn't. I mean, it's there before your very eyes. If you have a culture that believes, and I think it's extremely important in being part of the community and doing community outreach. I mean, when I was at Paramount, we had so many outreach programs that everybody, participated in, as did Viacom. They know that. The employees know they have a day off. They are supposed to volunteer. That makes you feel good about your company. If your boss is taking X amount of dollars and there's no bonuses for anybody, and you see him coming in, I'm not against any car, but in a big fancy car, you say, well, I guess he doesn't care that much. If your boss is distributing bonuses, and taking whatever is a fair share, you see that. It's in the paper, and you all know about it. Similarly, it's not so hard, no matter who you are, to tour a plant, if you have a plant, or to go to your constituency. I mean, whatever the company is, people respect that. They say, I can't believe it. So-and-so came by while we were working unexpectedly just to say thank you. Even if you have 50 plants and you show up, 2 every year, people talk about it.
It's staying connected.
It's staying connected. And just being, I just want to say one thing and then I'm done. I mean, I just remember, you drive on a studio lot, you smile and say good morning to the guy that lets you in. Right. It's not so, you should value that person as much. Walk around the lot, say thank you to everybody for what they're doing, because without them, you wouldn't exist.
That comes being comfortable with who you are. Because if you want to get away from, look, my grandfather was a hotel doorman. My paternal grandfather was a janitor. I have a great deal of respect for those positions. They were great men. They taught me a whole lot of values. So I'm not trying to run away from that. I think that a big part of, as we get success in leadership, is that we try to become somebody different than who we are. And I think that has a tendency, if your team believes that you care about them, they will walk on coals for you. If they don't, they're going to leave you there to die.
That's right.
It goes back to, sorry, it goes back to what you were saying, what you were saying, Cher. I think if you look at today's companies, founder-led companies, which have become really successful, they've done so because the founder and the culture of the company are unanimous. Yeah. So like people identify with the values of the founder, and the company therefore succeeds, because if it didn't succeed, we wouldn't be talking about them. So it's sort of, there's a selection bias. We get great companies led by great people who actually have a very strong value system. I think the challenge becomes, as those companies grow, how do you take that set of values that the founders have had and sort of, as you said, drive them through the organization, so make sure everybody is actually subscribing to the same value system. And the even bigger challenge shows up, as Joel's example, is when you're going through a change of leadership and you have a new leader who comes in, how does that leader sort of correlate to the values that exist in that company? And if they have a different value system, how does that either interact or act sort of against the culture of that company? And that becomes very important. So it's so much more important as you go through transitions where companies have strong values, is how do you make sure that value system continues to persist? Otherwise, you have sort of the fish stinks from the head down problem.
That's right.
Eric, you were...
Yeah, I can't help but think about it right now, today, maybe one of the biggest tests of leadership going on. I mean, set aside the president and all the things that are going on right now in the world, but the chief of police of the Baltimore City Police Department, going back to not forgetting who you are as a leader, and even when nobody's looking, or what about when everyone is looking? And so if you've got technology in here creating all these perceptions, and if you've talked to any of the press around here today, that's all they're asking, because it's all on the screens 24/7, what's going on in Baltimore. So the entire world seemingly looking at you, if you're a police officer, what is your chief doing? And it's those moments, too, where the true person comes out, because now it's almost like a family, and it's almost like the world is looking at you and ostracizing you and painting you with this brush of intolerance and the rest. And those moments in leadership, I believe, are so critical because that's how an organization like that police department or a company or what have you can actually survive, can grow from this type of experience.
It defines you as a leader, I think, in those moments.
Let me ask another question. And I did a case study of a company called FM Global, probably the most boring type of company in one of the most boring markets. It was an insurance company, but it was 165 years old. It had probably the best returns of any insurance company. It insured, it was property and casualty. So they're insuring warehouses. They had some customers like GE for over 100 years. So this was a really remarkable company. And I asked the CEO, as a leader of this company, what's the most important thing that you have as a tool? And he said to me, self-discipline. And I said, you know, what do you mean by self-discipline? He said, well, let me be very specific. I'm a spreadsheet junkie. I love numbers. I love to do the analysis myself. But I know if I am the only one doing it, number one, no one learns.
Right.
Number two, I'm keeping the best stuff in a sense for myself. So I have to share it. So I don't do that anymore. And he listed a lot of things he did not do that he loved doing because it did not, it kept him from being a good leader. Do you agree with that? How important is self-discipline as a leader?
I guess it depends on, I understand self-discipline, but the way you're describing it sort of makes the hair at the back of my neck stand.
Why is that?
Well, you described a company, and I have known nothing about FM Global. You told me it's one of the most boring companies, one of the most boring sectors. Now, I don't know if that's a consequence of the self-discipline or not. So it's very hard to say. Sort of like, you know, we all hear about the stories of Steve Jobs, where he was so obsessive that he didn't let anyone do anything, and he wanted to define everything, and Apple's one of the top 3 most valuable companies in the world. So I don't know if there's a right answer in there about I'm going to let everybody else do it because I don't want them to feel unhappy, yet I have to deal with mediocrity in the way I think about it, and I want to get my stuff not be the way I want it. So there is a fine balance between being a leader and inspiring people and making them grow and letting them do things, versus if you're the inventor and if you're the person who has a very different idea from the rest of the world, every time you get more people into that, you're more than likely going to average your idea out. So there's a difference between building something and changing the world and doing something in an entirely different way, where I think where the notion of self-discipline, the way you describe it, might interfere in the wrong way. But the idea of self-discipline, of course, is important because, you know, every person who's great at something has had to make sacrifices and choices. And if you haven't made those sacrifices and choices, you know, you haven't been great at it. You know, even if you're a great sportsman, you go out and play 10,000 hours or something, you're probably not going partying, you're not doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So I understand the need for self-discipline, but perhaps not in the FM Global sense.
Yeah, I think it's when it's linked to a strategy, and we haven't talked about that much. You know, we talked about a good leader and passion and inspiration, but what's the plan? What's the strategy that the leader has? And how has he or she articulated that? And that's when I think the self-discipline comes in, basically, and being able to execute on that strategy and plan.
Yeah, look, self-discipline, look, we can take self-discipline and say, look, every minute, every hour, you're frustrated by something, and that's a form of self-discipline on how you react to that. But in terms of, someone has to lead, and someone has to make the tough choices, especially when you're building a company. And it takes one skill set to build a company, start it off from scratch and build something special and build something innovative. That's a different skill set. There, discipline is a limitation. because then it starts getting you to think more practically. And practicality doesn't lead to innovation. So you want to push, as you're building and you want to innovate, you've got to push the envelope. You've got to be undisciplined because you've got to say, let's try it a different way. That didn't work, let's try it this way. Or who says you can't do it that way? But I think running a insurance company or something that is, pretty methodical, then you can have a formula, and pretty much just like baking a cake, if you follow that formula, then you should do well. You'll get your benchmark returns. But I think your point being that building a company, I think one of the things that we have done as a company ourselves is that we're not smart enough to think that we can't do anything. So we think we can do everything. And so we haven't seen an obstacle that we can't overcome yet. And I think that tends to be less disciplined. And
So, first of all, I want to go back. Whoever runs that insurance company does not think it's boring. I mean, one of my best friends started a huge insurance company, and he was passionate about it. He was a great leader. There's many insurance companies that do not work, and if you're there for 160 years, they must be doing something right, and they must be doing it with passion and conviction and hard work. So
That's a good point.
yeah,
That's true.
Because it's boring, maybe. I don't actually think it's sort of interesting insurance, but let's say it's boring to a lot of people, but it's not boring.
more exciting than real estate.
Yes, I don't know about that. I think real estate's great. But I actually have to say, from I'll go back to when I was running studios and producing movies, I desperately needed self-discipline. And I'll tell you why, because it's interesting. I tend to think, when I would make decisions about what movies to make at Paramount or what movies to make as a producer, often my emotions, I would love the script and my emotions would get carried away. And I would sit there and I would go, okay, you have this emotional reaction and it is a great script. It's going to cost $200 million and it should cost $30 million. You better use some self-discipline and say no. Or even worse, this just appeals to you. They want to do a movie about a 70-year-old woman. Actually, there is a huge market for that. But anyways,
We should make it. We should make it.
But, maybe you have to use, some self-discipline if it's going to cost too much money. No, there's a huge market for the adult films now. But I'm using that as an example. So I think actually you have to apply fiscal responsibility to your passion or to what interests you and make sure it's not just interesting you or that this movie isn't costing too much. And in addition, this is where I really needed self-discipline, and I found it very helpful, was count to 10, or don't send that letter. I would sometimes be sitting there and get so angry.
Well, especially now with email.
Yeah, it just gets
Pause.
so angry
Or
and pause.
tweeting, yeah.
And,
Wait a day.
that old thing, I remember once, it was not important going into it, but was so angry, and I called the lawyer and I said, they can't say this. He said, now write that all in a letter, put it in a drawer, and let's talk about it in 2 days. Because quite honestly, it was just an emotional reaction. So I needed self-discipline in dealing with employees, and my favorite expression when I was, getting angry or thought that an idea wasn't particularly intelligent was, I'm confused. And that would always kind of bridge the time for me to think, I'm
That was your
confused.
probably signal to the employees. They knew when you said that.
I feel
Or I would grab some food. So I think self-discipline, most leaders, not all, and certainly, if you're starting something and you have complete control, fine. But if you're running a company, I think most good leaders, certainly in politics, employ some inner regulator, or they wouldn't be able to continue. So, do we always?
But you can release a new idea before it's time.
Of course, but that's self-discipline too.
Oh,
You're
well,
saying,
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, sure. That's self-discipline. I can release a new idea ahead of its time, providing it's ready to be released. But you also have to use some self-discipline in saying, wow, how can we announce this? We don't have anything. So so it's a combination.
But what we're talking about here goes back to the initial discussion about passion and then the ability to execute. Self-discipline is the execution stage.
Yes.
And it goes back to the sensitivities that you got to have to the people you're leading. And I know, Cheryl, you're right, in the political sense, you know, believe it or not, it's about the credit and who gets the accolades for certain accomplishments, certainly in the legislative arena, the policy arena, and whose win is it? You got to be willing to share and then take a back seat if you're a leader.
You think politicians care about that?
Yeah, you think?
Credit.
Well, let me ask you another question, sort of the same kind of broad question, and that is, I remember going to Apple when it was a brand new company and seeing on people's desks something that was really interesting. And it was all about, it was worded differently depending on whose desk you walked by, but it would be start a revolution, or we're part of the revolution, or you know, we're going to change the world. And you think about where that company and others like it have gone. Same, by the way, was at Microsoft. They also saw themselves as revolutionaries. How important is having a big goal in the sense of really wanting to change the world, not just change your company or your department or do a good job?
I mean, at this point in time, if you think about it, I think there has never been a better stage in the world for big change. I mean, if you look at the role models of the last 10 or 15 years, you look at the Twitters, the Facebook, the Googles of the world, you know, every kid in every part of the world is looking at Elon Musk and Larry Page and Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs saying, even I can do this. So from an inspiration and looking at what the right role model is from a passion perspective, and I was in India until yesterday morning, I met this 21-year-old kid who dropped out of high school at 15 and has sneaked into every entrepreneurial conference trying to glean information from there. And right now, he just got funded last week. His third round of funding, $22 million. His company's worth $90 million, which is a big deal. He's 21 years old.
Big deal for
And he sits there, he's from a remote village in India, and he quotes Elon Musk and Larry Page to me. I'm sitting there talking to him, and I'm sort of blown out of my mind, sitting there talking to this young kid. So all this social media we talk about.
And that's passion.
And that's passion. I mean, this kid runs a sort of a budget motel thing. And I said, where do you live? He says, I live in one of them because every night I go stay in a different one. So I make sure that they keep the quality up, and I do housekeeping one night a week. So when you look at this stuff, you sit there and say, oh my God, look at the passion, look at the execution, look at the inspiration, and look at the fact that this kid has been able to take from all the technology we have and go and get inspired and do this. So I think from, to go back to your question, like there's never been a bigger stage than today to go out and create huge change. I mean, if you think about 50 years ago, if you wanted to start a global business or a national business, it would take you a long time because you had to go to every city, acquire the real estate, put your storefront up, and do stuff. Today, you can sit in a garage or somewhere, and you have Amazon Cloud, and you can be 100% as secure as Amazon or any large internet company overnight. You can have people in 150 countries access your services in the morning because everybody's connected to the internet. So a lot of the friction of starting businesses or doing things has been taken out of the system. And that just provides people with a global stage. And hence, they can come up with very, very big ideas. And it's like nobody wants to now start the best store in their neighborhood. They want to go out and create global change. And I think that's huge because a big goal is more likely to inspire a lot of people to follow you than a small goal.
And I think we talked about, social media, that you have to react instantly to a crisis.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing about social media is we're all in the same room. No matter where we live today, we have access to all the information with, I think, rare exceptions where it's blocked. But basically that young boy living in India is reading about this and is inspired to create something. And it's never been more evident than in the movie business. When I started in the movie business, you had an idea, you had to go to one of the 4 or 5 studios, you had to beg them to give you a little money to develop a script, on and on and on, and you were constantly needy. Today, on your cell phone, you can make a movie, and it's going to be incredibly high quality. You can post it on the internet, on many, many sites, and every studio executive is looking at that, every financier is looking at that, and from that, you can be the next director of a huge film.
It's power.
It's real power. Yeah.
Real power.
And how is that changing leadership? How are these tools? I mean, if you can reach everyone in the world, which you can from a village, assuming you have electricity and some bandwidth and so forth, how does that change leadership? Or is it a different kind of leader that's going to emerge? I mean, it used to be you had to project to a room this size. And if you could do that, you could build it up, gain a following. Now, if you're 21 and you have the tools, you can reach everyone, billions. So
I think you have to be smarter. You have to be smarter. We were talking about this a little bit on our call. When you're a leader and say you make a mistake and you need to apologize to your audience internally as well as externally, picking the right medium to do that is critical now because we have so many. We're talking on our call about people sometimes giving a very serious apology by doing it on Twitter. And is that the right medium? You have so many things to choose from now. So I think a good leader has to take a moment. We talked earlier about pausing before you execute. That is so incredible. And it's important because once you put something out, you can't take it back. You can't take it back. We've also seen, and I think this is important in leadership, there's a shorter time now when you make a mistake.
Yeah.
Because heads will roll instantly because there's too much at stake. So it's not a whole lot of time where, oh, the CEO made a mistake. They didn't act soon enough. And so you've given a whole nother quarter to try to fix things. No, that is no longer the case now. The stakes are too high.
I think
Yeah, I think technology also allows you to communicate more directly. Everyone's more accessible.
It's a plus and a minus, no?
I think I agree. It's a plus and a minus. For running our business, it has enabled us the freedom, and me the freedom, to run a business in 7 different cities and still have some personal contact with our team. We do a lot of video conferencing. We get to see our architectural drawings and so forth on the screen and have meetings that are very productive that ordinarily I would have to fly 2,000 miles to go and sit in a meeting and spend 2 days to do. I can do it in 30 to 40 minutes. And so it makes us a much more effective business. But I think the biggest thing that I had to learn with technology is I am a passionate person. And so if I saw something that I didn't like or something happened that I didn't like, I'd want to react to it immediately. And so the emails would pop out right away, and I'd say, oh my God, did I really send that? So I've learned to wait 24 hours when I'm angry. I put it in my draft box, and then I revisit my draft box each morning with a cup of coffee and then decide what goes out. And I would say that about 80% of things that are in that draft box get discarded. Mm-hmm. So that is, I think, the biggest downside is that the quick reaction, the passionate reaction that is not self-disciplined, that goes out, that can cause problems across the board. And you'll see it in politics quite a bit, and in business, things that you would ordinarily not say and that you'd have more time to react to, you can't anymore.
But it's just,
I really think it's a question of, you have much less control now about the public perception of your leadership. And I get the sort of and the fact that you have all these tools available and you can reach out. But we asked before, and Sherry, you talked about the thousands of employees you had and sort of the perception that they sort of formed in their mind about you as a leader. Think of what it means now, not just as a political leader, but accentuated in that arena, the control factor. And that's why I think technology has upped the game. I mean, you just got to be better, and you got to think about all these different dimensions of how to best lead with all this sort of mayhem around you.
So I actually had a thought, and I don't know, that I found very inspirational when I was listening to you talk about that young boy in India, and I thought, okay, so now we're talking about all the positive, and we do really feel that the new wave of social media and the globalization is positive, and I think what it's done, and I really do believe this, has made the democratization of entrepreneurship.
yes.
And that is revolutionary, and that's a very positive thing. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean leadership. but entrepreneurship. So you can be a little boy in a remote village, and you can have an idea. I mean, this is just, to me, so exciting. Or a little girl in a village, and you can have an idea. And yes, you probably need some money to get it started. So I'm not saying this is easy by any means, but you can start a movement. And
The opportunity is there.
that's right. And also, and I'll just end with this, the change in philanthropy, which is something I care very much about now. You've seen it with the ice bucket challenge. I mean, think about that. Think about they raised $40 million by just doing social media. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, Stand Up to Cancer, we use it all the time. So this democratization of entrepreneurship, to me, is one of the most exciting and positive things that'll lead to everything that we want to make the world better.
Joel,
I'm sorry, but we're running out of time. So let me ask each of the panelists to leave the people here with what's the most important lesson in leadership that you can express in 30 seconds?
oh my God.
That's what we've been doing.
I think that's what we've been doing for the last hour. But I think, as all of us have collectively sort of concluded, there are going to be lots of trials and tribulations in the process of evolving as a great leader. I think staying true to yourself and staying true to your values and to your passion, and if you believe you have learned something in the process of evolution, the willingness to accept the feedback and change, I think are all important things as a leader.
And I'm going to go full circle back to what my initial statement was. It's about change management, and it is about bringing people along as to how to conquer that change and how your leadership fits into the rapid change going on, bringing about all these positive advancements due to technology.
So I would have to say, be authentic, be yourself. People will smell it if you're not, and follow your own passion, and never give up.
I would say take risks, lead with integrity, and be open to change. I actually got it in 30 seconds.
I agree with you. I think take risk to disrupt, to look to transform, to lead with a purpose, and to remember that your passion is your self-motivator, but to inspire others to push and to transform and give them a sense of greater purpose than the general business issue at hand.
Well, great. Thank you, panel, for your contributions and your leadership in this area. And thank you all for coming to this session. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All of you. Thank you. Is the company Lehman Brothers?
Michael.